Good day everyone, I'm Engineer Shane and today I'm going to discuss about the topic how to interpret a contract, key contract elements and how to read them as part of the construction contract subjects. Learning outcomes at the end of this lecture, students will be able to identify key construction contract documents, explain the purpose of each contract element, differentiate common bonds, securities, and addenda, describe the basic process of contract formation, apply basic principles of contract interpretation, and recognize why proper contract documentation matters. For construction contract elements, a construction contract is made up of several documents that define the parties' obligations, scope, price, time, quality, and risk. So as we know by the definition of a contract, it is an agreement between two or more parties. With that, it needs to have details. And what are those details? These are the core elements of a contract. Agreement, conditions of the contract divided into general and special, technical specifications, drawings, bonds and securities, addenda, and other incorporated documents. First, for the agreement is the main document that formally binds the owner and the contractor, the client or the supplier, or anyone who needs to have an agreement of something. The details are usually identifies the parties to the contract. As we mentioned a while ago, the definition of a contract is an agreement between two or more parties. So the name of the parties involved in the contract is here. The project and the scope, the contract price, the contract duration or the completion date, the effectivity date, and the signatures or the authority. Think of it as a contract's main deal. So in agreement, it is the first part wherein the details are mentioned. Next. Now, as we go further in the parts of the contract, we will now be talking about the general conditions of the contract. From the word itself, the general conditions, which also contain the standard rules governing the project. The common provisions or the common information here are the following. What are the rules and responsibilities of each parties? What will be the payment procedures? How will both parties be dealing with changes or variations, also called as a change order or variation orders? For time extension claims, what are the details? What if delay happens? How will it be? How will it be solved, managed, or negotiated? If in case suspension or termination happens, how will it be? What are the details? Also, for about claims and dispute resolution, also details about insurance and risk allocations. Next, if there is a general conditions of the contract, there's also a special conditions of the contract. From the word itself, special conditions wherein it can be modified or supplement the general condition for the specific project. As we go here on the bottom, the rule of thumb, general is a standard rules, special are project specific rules. Who can be requesting for the special conditions of the contract? Any of the parties. As long as both of the parties agree with the information on the special conditions, that's okay. Special conditions means anything that is not in the general conditions, wherein the general conditions are the standards. So anything that is special, anything that is customized or additional that is not mentioned in the general conditions can be put in the special conditions of the contract. So with that, examples of these are special working hours if in case for this specific project, the client wants or requesting a special working hours than the general one. Site restrictions, if in case the contractor has specific site restrictions based on the actual site condition. It can also be specific insurance requirements by the client to the contractor. Particular liquidated damages provisions. If you're familiar with liquidated damages, this is the payment that the contractor will pay the client if in case it exceeds the construction duration. So it depends if the client has a specific liquidated damages formula, and it's okay if as long as the contractor agrees with it. But the common is one tenth of 1% for every day of the delay of TCP. That will be the amount that will be on how the liquidated damages is computed. And other specific project notice requirements. Again, both sides can provide clauses for the special conditions. Next, part of the contract is the technical specifications, wherein specifications describe what is required and how the work or material should perform. Information inside the technical specifications are materials and standards, workmanship, what is the expectation, how will it be tested and inspected, methodology or installation requirements, quality requirements for checklist, measurement, and payment. This is an additional. For example, 12 mm moisture resistant gypsum board on metal furring. As you can see here, what is required to be installed for ceiling works? It is this material. So specific. But in technical specifications, it is through words. On the other hand, through drawings, we can communicate the design visually. That's why technical specifications and drawings should work hand in hand, because these are important documents that is included in the contract. If there is a disagreement or a confusion in between technical specification and drawings, you need to address it, because it can cause conflict during the construction. So later we will be discussing what should govern between technical specifications or drawings if in case they have not same information. On the other hand, as we know, drawings, since we had this subject in our first year of civil engineering course, this will show dimensions and location, details and sections, structural and architectural information, MEP or MEPF layouts, and more construction details in visual. With that, technical drawings or technical specifications are more on words, drawings is more on visual. You seldom see sentences, paragraphs in a drawing, but there is still words which will direct you on how to interpret or read drawings, just for a guide. But more of the words should be aligned with the technical specifications. I hope that's clear. Next, bonds and securities. Also part of the contract, wherein bonds and securities protect the parties, both of the parties, against specific contract risk. So common examples of the bonds and securities are the following: bid security, which supports the bidding commitment; performance bond, which protects against the non-performance of the other party; payment bond protects payment obligations where required; and retention or other securities provide additional protection. Again, clauses about bonds and securities are included in the contract. Also, this is included in the contract in detail. So the both parties, whether the owner or the contractor, should feel secure with the agreement that you are entering. If in case something happens, for example, if the client will require the contractor a performance bond, meaning the client is expecting the contractor to perform well. That's part of the contract, because you will be having the cost, the duration, the details, the scope of work. But if in case that the contractor didn't comply with the details in the contract, there is still a performance bond that will pay the client for the misperformance of the contractor. And on the other hand, any breach of contract, if the contractor didn't perform as indicated in the contract, it is a breach of contract. That's why this is bonds and securities are just for security of what if. But should not be tolerated. Addenda. Addenda is a document, an official written change or clarification issued before the contract award or signing. It can be a series of clarification. That's why one is called an addendum. More clarification is called an addenda. It includes maybe of the following or all clarifying drawings or specifications, since as mentioned a while ago, it might be not aligned because technical specifications are in words, drawings are in visual. So before signing the contract or before awarding the contract to the contractor should clarify, and the document release upon clarification can also be used as an official document for guide in the construction phase is called an addenda. Also correct errors if in case there are errors in the contract draft or in any document. For anything clarification, answer bidder questions if in case they cannot understand some of the words used or some of the dimensions used, change in quantities or requirements. If in case in the course of the bidding process there has some design changes, it should be released via addenda. And extended bid deadlines if in case for formality, everyone should be informed. Key points, addenda become part of the contract when it is properly incorporated. And as mentioned a while ago, if addenda is an official document for any clarification. So for the meeting of clarification not to be unknown, the addenda release should be attached as well, just in case that if it's not included in the contract, if it's not included anywhere, the details of clarification and changes and agreement can be found in the addenda. I hope that's clear. Now, for the contract information, this is a process by which the parties create a legally binding agreement. So the parties are now signing. Once they sign, they are legally binded by that agreement. So the basic idea is to provide offer and proposal to be accepted by both parties, consideration if in case there will be a negotiation for the agreed price or the value or the scope that wants to be completed, intent and authority. When you are signing a contract, both parties should be in good faith. Your intent to the other party should be in good faith. And with that, and lastly is required formalities and documentation. As we discussed a while ago, those details are required as part of your contract and guidance if in case something happens in the future. In construction, formation also depends on the tender, the award, the signed agreement, and incorporated documents. As future civil engineers, now you know what are the contents of the contract and what are the other incorporated documents are needed. You should apply it in the construction industry. Next, for the contract interpretation, this is important in terms of or in times of determining what the contract documents require when wording or documents appear unclear or inconsistent. The good practice are the following. Read the contract as a whole. Even if the font size are smaller, even if the papers are many, you should read the contract as whole. Because once you sign the contract, even if you claim one day that you didn't understand something, once you agreed, it is officially, mutually agreed that you understand everything that you signed for. Ignorance of signing the contract will not void the contract. If you didn't understand and you didn't comply what is written, you will also be filed for a breach of contract. So you cannot be ignorant about it. Next is you need to check definitions and reference documents. If there is a term or a reference that is mentioned in the contract, you should always check those definitions as well, because you might have different interpretations. If needed, put a part wherein you define all of the uncommon words, the technical words, the jargons that is used in the contract. Don't be shy or ashamed in requesting requirements, as long as, because the goal is you need to understand everything that is in the contract, because again, as mentioned a while ago, you cannot say no. You cannot be ignorant if in case you didn't understand any part of the contract because you signed it. I hope that's clear. Then use the document hierarchy or order of precedence, which will be discussed on the next slide. Check the latest approved revisions and addenda. That's why addenda is important, because sometimes contract is signed and there still has additional addenda. You should always check what's as a whole. And addenda is normally attached after the contract. So you need to read everything if in case there are some been changes. Again, you cannot say that you haven't read the addenda and just understood the contract if addenda is attached, because that is your responsibility as the reader, as part of the party in the contract. This is also important. Avoid relying on assumptions. If you will be assuming something for yourself to the client, to the other party, or you also assume this is the interpretation of the client, that is wrong. Don't assume. Make sure that everything is written well. Because someday, if there will be disagreement, you cannot say that I assume this is your interpretation. That is wrong. Because if in case you have confusion or anything to clarify, you should already put it in the contract. And then last, raise ambiguities through the formal clarification process. Again, it's okay if you don't understand anything in the contract. The goal in both parties is for you to be at peace, in good faith, in everything that is written in the contract. So anything that can raise ambiguity, meaning any unnecessary confusion or not certain or uncertainty, you should clarify that. And through the formal clarification process or through the clarification meeting. If there is a clarification but informal or not put into paper, you should make it release as a formal documentation. Because everything that is not documented didn't happen. Okay? With that, let's move to the document hierarchy. This is in case when documents conflict, the contract should identify which document takes precedence, who will govern. Okay? So the common hierarchy may include the topmost powerful priority for document interpretation. If in case there is a conflict, is the contract agreement. That's why before you sign a contract, the first page, the next page, the whole contract agreement should be read well. Even if the address, the duration, the cost, the names of the parties should be checked well. Because someday, if there will be conflict, for example, with the name, the other party can ignore or disagree with that. For example, less of a letter or a different name instead of the client's name. They can say no on it. So with that, you also need to attach IDs to prove that the person's name in the agreement is also the person in the ID for identification. So I hope that's clear. Then the second hierarchy is the special conditions. The third is the general conditions. So that's why we need to specify well special conditions of the contract that is specifically for the project, because this governs after the contract agreement. General conditions is the third one because the details are general, so that's why it's lower than the special conditions. Fourth is the addenda, because as we mentioned a while ago, these are the official document for any changes from the contract agreement or during the clarification. So this is important and updated. Fifth is the technical specifications. And last is the drawings. Sometimes BOQ is also included. Let's discuss. Why do technical specifications, drawings, and BOQs are at the lower part of the document hierarchy in terms of conflict resolution, contract conflict resolution? Because technical specifications are dependent or an output of the contract, because that is the scope of works. Contract agreement includes scope of works, and technical specifications is an output of that. Drawings as well is lower than the technical specifications because these are just visual representations of the design. So if in case errors are more prone in the drawings, more so with the BOQ, which is just dependent in the drawings and technical specifications and the contract. So with that, no, let's have an example. Okay. Scenario. Drawing shows 9 mm gypsum board, but the technical specification requires 12 millimeters. Based on the document hierarchy discussion a while ago, what should govern? Do not simply choose one based on preference. We should not assume, as mentioned a while ago. We check the contractor's order of precedence or the document's hierarchy. Check the addenda or latest revisions, because sometimes drawing is updated to 12 mm. So there is no conflict already. Or technical specification changes to 9 mm. So with that, 9 mm is the governing thickness of the gypsum board. Or you may raise a formal RFI or clarification if it's still unclear. Document the approved instruction. So on this second reminder on what to do, technical specification will govern. But if in case you should follow the other steps to check what should be the final decision as you do the construction of gypsum. Imagine, class, you will order 9 mm or 12 mm. This matter because a ceiling work costs big area. So if you order a different thickness, that will not be aligned with the design. That will also suffer in terms of the usage of the client. So we really need to be mindful with this one. That's why we are discussing this topic for you to know how to decide as a construction management specialized in terms of contract documents and documents hierarchy. Lesson, contract administration is about document control, not guesswork. So again, you need to have all the documents needed so you can decide well. And as a civil engineer who specializes in construction management, you now know what are the document hierarchy and not just guessing, because we are technical. To summarize, remember the contract as a system. If agreement, what is the deal? What are the details? For conditions, whether it is general or special, what are the rules? Specifications, what quality or work is required. For drawings, where or how it is shown. Bonds, what the risks are secured. Addenda, what changed before award. Formation, how did the contract become binding? And interpretation, what applies when documents conflict. Always check the actual contract before making a contractual decision. And as future civil engineers who major in construction management, I hope you will learn not just to be technical, how to compute, how to draw, but also how to read contracts and how to interpret them. See you on the next one.